to Building Public University slash Idea Supply Chain, depending on which part of the internet you're coming from. YouTube is Idea Supply Chain. Kind of everywhere else right now is Building Public University. Um, let's see, let's make sure. LinkedIn is still connecting, as always, which, I've made that joke before on live streams. As it turns out, that is a uh, key piece of this theory I've been working on called network relativity, which basically says that different networks communicate changes about the world in different ways and at different relative speeds. And so, there we go. LinkedIn is joined. Excellent. Um, Welcome to the present, LinkedIn. We were just discussing network relativity, which is the idea that not all networks are at the same place and time. And so, this is actually a really fascinating concept because it has unlocked a whole bunch of things. And we're going to talk about that today. And I should probably start promoting this because I'm gonna actually drop some pretty big ideas, and maybe people would like to see that. Except I don't actually know how to promote any of these. So uh, let's see. Here we go. Oh, this is. How do I? Let's see. Who wants to talk about solution to P versus NP? All right. Let's see if that attracts anybody. Do we have any notifications? Um, okay, cool. Yeah. So, um, basically, a couple days ago, I was in the middle of this huge push to help a friend who needed help. And, in doing so, I realized a lot of things. I realized that in terms of entrepreneurship, I had not done nearly enough in terms of building relationships that I thought that I thought I had done. It's really hard to know how trusted given relationships are online because there are some of us who don't really have experience building real networking relationships in person. I got started at this whole entrepreneurship thing during COVID, like a lot of us did. And everybody else, COVID kind of went away for most people effectively to where it's not their main focus. Um, and Oh, hi, Kitty. Okay, this is Pearl. She's a parrot. She thinks. Um, and Okay. So what was I talking about? Thanks, Pearl. Um, so, uh, working. Okay. Claws. Thank you. Thanks, Pearl. Um, so we're working remotely during the pandemic, not really developing these real networking skills. And kind of during my 10 years in industry, I was always really focused on learning as much as I could so I could do my job to the best of my abilities. And I always had a hard time integrating with other people. No, okay, we're going down. All right. Um, and so I got really good at the learning, not so good at the communicating. And then during COVID, I figured a lot of things out personally and realized that I was greatly lacking in human connection. It's one of those things that becomes obvious when you don't have it anymore. Um, and so I kind of started trying to find it. And, at first it was online, which was great because everybody else was online. But then other people kind of went offline and my life stayed online. Um, but because I was still kind of building and learning on previous things that I had picked up during COVID, my timeline was very steady to me. I was getting better. My relationship building skills were getting stronger. Um, but to somebody who has a life that is very, very highly connected to people, what seems like a very strong connection to me seems like a very weak connection to them. Um, and so basically, if we look at this through the lens of network relativity, what we see is that I'm in the future and they're in the past because basically I see more of them than they see of me because I can look backwards, right? Like I'm looking backwards from the point that we interacted and it was beneficial for both of us, right? Because I'm able to see where they are and where they want to go. And I've got this big idea, this big vision for the world, and I see how that interacts. And I go, cool, this is what we need to do. Except the people that I'm talking to see a vision of the world based on what's here now. And I see one based on what's in my head of what can be. And so when I say, let's do this, everybody looks at that and goes, but no, we're supposed to be going this way. And my whole thing is like, that way is wrong. That's not the fastest route to get where you want to go. And in fact, it's the exact opposite way that you want to go. Like, there be dragons, right? Like, stay the fuck away from that route. I know everybody's going that way. The whole point is that that's the wrong way. When we start coupling that messaging with concern about a friend in need, it's really easy to fuck it all up. Um, you know, at first, I did all of this stuff frantically. I was like, okay, I'm going to find somebody that will help now. It's the internet, it's always connected. There's gotta be somebody there who can help. Okay, so I started thinking about my assets. What do I have access to be able to help somebody now? I don't have any cash. I've been a researcher that everybody's been ignoring for 5 years. Sure as fuck don't have cash. Yet. So at this point, a friend needs help. What do I have? Well, okay, so we've got a PayPal address. By the way, if you donate anything to that PayPal address, um, there's going to be some really cool things coming for you in the future, and we're going to talk about that later. Um, but what I wanted to do with that is then, okay, so this is actually a perfect way to demonstrate exactly what I'm talking about with network relativity because there are two different types of time. And this is something that is like really important to figure out. And this is the core of everything I've been doing. There's system time, which is flat. System time is the coordination time for all of the pieces in the system to be able to coordinate. And we've taken this idea of system time and we've used it to create this ever-present hellish now. And that's all Silicon Valley's fault, and we're going to get into that. But uh, what we really need to give computers awareness of is human time. And right now, there is this phenomenon that I'm calling time violence, where basically people who have um, an advantageous temporal position, which is a really fancy way to say better information than you do. Um, because in terms of information systems, you can look at time as a function of like how much information you can take in and like how many insights you're able to generate from that information because it's this constant process, right? You're constantly taking in information and constantly producing output, which is then entropy that you use to kind of take more input into the system. And so over time, you're going to see that you have this system that takes more information in and creates more entropy. And this is something that Silicon Valley did great. They nailed the communication. Hi again, Pearl. Um, and they figured out a way to like align incentives for a shared target in such a way that like worked way better than existing models. And the problem is they were early to the internet because that's kind of where it developed. And so their network distance was closer. And so in Silicon Valley, this actually had a really bizarre impact. And you can see it in a lot of different ways. But it's the epicenter of this like broken timeline where basically they started generating more complexity than the rest of the world could handle. And what that looks like is it looks like social media with no shared version of reality. It looks like AI systems that are, completely like sycophantic and telling people that they are, gods and everybody needs to bow to them or whatever they're doing now. I've seen some weird shit come out of that. And it's really hard to tell because all the systems are so fucked up that it's all about like marketing your position of your ideas to people and kind of pulling in your tribe. It's all about being in the future of other people and like telling them where to go on the internet. Um, and I'm done playing their games. And it became very obvious to me that like nobody was interested in helping no matter what I did. I have 5 years of public work. I've got how many videos on YouTube? I've got hundreds of blogs at this point. All sorts of work, relationships that I've built up, and what I've realized is that like I couldn't get money through any of them. Nobody has any money because it's all compressed in Silicon Valley. And all of my ideas aren't really what Silicon Valley is looking for. They've told me that quite a bit. For 5 years, in fact, they've told me my ideas aren't what they're looking for. Which explains why they couldn't find the answers that they sought, notably AGI and, P versus NP. Um, because those two things are related. Um, and, one of the things that I've been trying to argue is that intelligence isn't a function of ego, it's a function of networks. Um, and Silicon Valley is a function of egos, not intelligence. They think they're smarter because they're in the future. It's really easy to win the game when you're the one dictating the playing field and all the rules of the game, and basically acting as gods in a world that is powerless to beat you at that. Um, but stories typically give way to hubris, and people remember that they aren't gods. And it's typically when somebody like me, somebody unheralded, somebody that has been ignored for 5 years now, comes along and says something like, "Oh, hey, by the way, guys, I solved P versus NP. Good luck catching up now." Um, because that's what I did like 3 days ago. In this frantic search for trying to figure out how to help a friend and modeling these network behaviors of like who's willing to help when I say different things and who's not and who's excited about ideas. I've known I was onto something big for 5 years. I've tried to bring people along on that journey. And 3 days ago was the end of that part of the journey. That was the final answer I needed. Because what it shows us is that it shows us that like P and NP is a cycle. Um, and we can actually take a quick look at the math here. Um, maybe if I can figure out how to share the right screen. There we go. That's the tab we want to share. Okay. Um, and so basically, you know, what we're looking at is like a problem is either in a like P state or in an NP state. And so it's in an NP state if like we don't know how to solve it with an algorithm. And so the discovery time is way more than the verification time because we don't know if there's an answer, right? Um, and when we don't know if there's an answer, it's really hard to run a computer to go find that answer. Okay. So the other like temporal state a problem can be in is a temporal p state, which is if there's an algorithm that exists at that time, and basically like we can know the execution of that time, because then we can optimize the time it takes to run that algorithm. And so you have a problem solved, and then the time it takes to solve that problem is always going down over time. Um, and then so this means that there's like this transition event with human problem solvers where they convert a problem from NP into P. Um, and there's this transition event, which is like the time that a problem switches from NP into P. So right now, I'm the set of human problem solvers. I'm a set of one, and I solved the PNP problem. So the PNP problem transitioned from like a temporal NP state to a temporal P state. And this means that I've created an epicenter of change because now the clock is racing. And so we can actually use this a lot of ways because what we can say is that then there's this entropy evolution where so we've got kind of this amount of information available, and the probability of a solution being like explored, right, at a given time, and then there's a point at which like the entropy collapses as an algorithm is found. And so when I hit that state of understanding, suddenly I'm able to remove all of the complexity that I've been generating over the past 5 years. And if you've been around me, I've been generating a fuck ton of complexity because I found the algorithm. And that's exactly what just happened 3 days ago. And so now what we can do is we can actually define what I've been calling time violence, which basically says that, like, are you getting credit for the problems that you're actually the one to solve first? Or is the system delaying, like, the capture of problems that you solve, like, for their own value? And basically, are you getting credit for the work that you're actually doing in a given system? And I can tell you straight up, the answer is no. You are being straight mined for your time by architects of complexity. Hi, girl. Hi yet again. She likes computers. Um, and so now we actually get something really interesting. So in my study of network relativity, we have this thing called the network relativity speed. And let's see, I have something playing and I don't know what. Oh, there we go. That's okay. There we go. That's the one playing. Sorry, that was weird. All right, cool. So we have this. discovery verification coupling. So this network invariant speed, and what this means is that there is the time it takes between when a problem is solved to like where it is validated in the network and then is able to be used to solve downstream things. And so when we look at the network invariant speed, this is very similar to the speed of light in physics, right? It's the idea that like you can't observe something that is moving faster than your ability to like sample it. So if you have something moving faster than the speed of light, you can't track where it's going because everything you see from it is further away than it was when the light hit it and bounced back, right? And so you have this like delayed effect. And this is exactly what we're seeing like with Silicon Valley. They're at the forefront of technology, and so they're just blasting everything they can onto the internet to try to get people um, onto these networks that they create so that they can mine you for data and use that to make themselves rich because that's the Silicon Valley method. It's a proven playbook. And in fact, it's extremely profitable if you look at Silicon Valley. Well, it's extremely profitable if you're in tech in Silicon Valley. If you're anywhere else in Silicon Valley, it completely skews the economy and has led to a pit of homelessness and decay, which then you actually add in a bunch of complexity because you've got people who aren't able to move as quickly as the tech crowd, trying to kind of constantly battle against these like increasingly powerful dynamics. And so there's all sorts of really weird shit at play in Silicon Valley, which is why it's this epicenter of change. Now, the really weird thing is that actually makes it very easy for things to start changing there because everything is kind of changing all the time. And we've accepted that, like, some things are bad. And, like, okay, San Francisco's kind of shitty. And it's like, well, yeah, but, like, there is a reason for that. And we've never actually stopped to try to figure out, like, why it is. There's a lot of finger pointing, but there's never been really, like, working together to solve it. And so, um, what we can do is like figure out some different solutions now that we're able to define the problem. Because I don't blame Silicon Valley for what they did. That's how the economy works. They were right early, and they did that. But the problem is the rest of the network infrastructure wasn't there to support everything going, global. And so we don't have the ability to actually like validate or defend against all of the shit that's coming out of Silicon Valley until now. Um, and so what one of the things that I've been playing with is this idea of sub-universes, which basically allows you to take all of the information in a given universe. And so whatever reality is that you want to define, because that's just like the sum of all available information. And so what you can do is you can create a subset of that, which is a sub-universe. It's a um, subset of the information of the universe. And you can create all sorts of different versions of this sub-universe that all explore the same problem. And so what you want to do is you want to basically like, okay, we know it's going to be really hard to solve if we just use all of the information in the universe. But if we only have a subset of the information, then we can kind of figure out who is able to use the best subset to find the information first, because then it becomes a matter of optimization, and then that is a different problem for the network. And so what you have is like a good way to think about this is actually like humans are sub universes of the universe. We have the entire universe in ourselves, kind of, but it's a compressed version, right? We're able to understand the world around us and adapt to it, but we'll never have the full information of the universe. And that's a feature, not a bug, because of this idea here that we can work in tandem to basically solve the unsolved problems together. And this is where economic value really comes from because um, you have this idea of creating value. And this is ultimately what creating value is. Creating value is solving a problem that needs solved in the economy when it needs solved. For my friend, the problem that needed solved in the economy was getting help now. And, we've been trying all sorts of different models to actually get help there now. And the problem is, I don't have a good way to turn this first solver advantage into direct revenue because the economy doesn't account for this unless you're in Silicon Valley in the right networks. And I tried to give them this, right? Like I spent many times over the past 5 years, talking to VCs. And not a ton of time because guess what? I don't want to spend all my time talking to VCs. I want to spend my time solving problems that fucking matter. And what I realized is that even the VCs that I thought were in it for the right reasons didn't see things the same way I did. And so that's fine. They're wrong. And that's what I'm proving now. And so one of the things that I've been doing is actually um, trying to maximize my temporal monopoly, basically. So, and I've been doing this while actually sharing it with the world because the fact of the matter is, I've tried to give everything that I've done to the world for free. Um, because I felt that it was information that needed to be out there. And I had a hard time simplifying it because I was still creating the complexity needed to solve the problem. But now that I've done that, it's time to absolutely maximize that temporal monopoly. And I'm doing that by basically um, restructuring the center of tech development. I think it's going to be based around Columbus, Ohio. Sounds nice. It's kind of in the middle. And so we've started talking about that. Because then what we can do, because we know this and we have this set up, we can actually set up a direct innovation chain where we can actually study how powerful given innovations are and where they're coming out of. Um, and so when I started the YouTube channel and called it the Idea Supply Chain, this is kind of where I was heading, right? So you can actually see getting from this idea supply chain to this innovation chain where you're actually able to solve more previously unsolved problems. Um, and then you can, go through and actually uh, formalize this gap between human and system time. Um, because then suddenly you've got this unbounded growth and unsolved problems. That's complexity inflation. Um, and so, basically, you're creating more entropy than the system can easily filter um, based on the network designs. And so what you want to do is you actually want to optimize for individual discovery rates. And so I've done this personally by getting really good at working in tandem with AI. And basically, I work with AI to take a whole bunch of information and turn it into something um, relatively stable that I can use. And a good way to think of this is like a paper, an academic paper, right? It's like, okay, here's kind of a stable form of all of this information that we can use to make further decisions. And um, so that's how I've maximized my own discovery acceleration, which led me to this. And so it's always really cool to kind of see these systems that are self-referential and the solution is leading me to the actual ability to communicate the solution. It's a very weird thing. And so basically, I've always talked about businesses in the internet age being a blend of like product, media, and education. And as it turns out, it's because this is a completely balanced system where basically you've got like, the product is focusing in on how the like value is being created now. The education is working to like educate the market and basically create the entropy needed to flush out the bad market players, because when you start adding more and more transparency around how systems work, bad actors are basically left in the lurch because they can't be as transparent without exposing themselves as being bad actors. Um, and so with education, you want to also be making sure that you can bring people in who are then able to work within your system as effectively as possible, so they're not dealing with all of the bullshit of dealing with your system as opposed to dealing with the crazy bullshit of the actual world that is getting crazier and more bullshitty. Um, and so you want to balance this like product education, and then media is basically helping the market minimize that information asymmetry. And so your education arm is helping kind of inform the future like internally, and the media is informing the future externally, and kind of the product is kind of that pivot point um, between internal and external. um, and so this gives us that basically we get this theorem that means that all problems start in a temporal NP state. We use human discovery to transition them into a temporal P state. This means that system optimization always lags, and that value always accrues disproportionately to first solvers, which we see, right? And this is what crypto does. Um, but it said, hey, let's make the computer just solve a really hard problem that no human can solve. And it's like, well, but that's like technically right, but like not meaningfully right, if that makes sense. Um, and so basically, then we can look at the value um, of a transition is proportional to the entropy reduction. Now, this has really big fucking implications, especially for me. Now, if you've been following along, the PNP problem is kind of a big fucking deal. And quite honestly, when I realized what I had done, I'm still figuring out how to process that. Um, but the highest value comes from solving the most disordered problems. And so what I did is I just solved the most disordered problem in the history of humanity, because it's the problem of time that we hadn't been able to solve yet. And so what we actually see is that we need to simply design systems that accelerate human discovery, streamline verification, distribute rewards fairly, and actually manage complexity inflation, as opposed to and shitification. Because I don't know about you, but I am sick and fucking tired of all the fucking bullshit that I have to put up with because a bunch of dipshits in Silicon Valley making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year are fucking a bunch of lemmings that follow exactly what everybody else is doing, because the entire system is based on them staying in line long enough to get their turn to raise a bunch of money and be the one in charge. And fuck all of that. We're done with that shit. It's time to start building a new internet, one that is actually built on designing human value and recognizing the value of humans in society and kicking tech back to the curb as a tool where it fucking belongs. I'm tired of living my life in a deferred way, solving problems that Silicon Valley couldn't be bothered to look at because they were getting rich while everybody else was suffering the backlash of their ineptitude, and they just ignored it the whole fucking time. So the clock is reset. Everything has started over. We're designing a new internet. The center of it's going to be Building Public University. You can find everything you need to know. Hitchhiker'sGuide-to-the-Future.com. There's the newsletter. Everything is going to start making sense a lot sooner than you think because Silicon Valley is no longer going to be the one in charge of telling you what sense looks like. And so, what we're going to do is we're going to start by building online communities that work together and really do the world the service of cleaning up the bullshit. Got a great friend who has a saying. He's like, life is all unicorns and rainbows. And it's hard to see the rainbows when all we look around and see is shit. Because guess what? Unicorn shit. And in order to really appreciate the rainbows, we still have to clean up the shit. And the problem is, the unicorns in Silicon Valley are making the rest of us clean up their shit while they get to be unicorns and just live without any of the shit that they're creating. I think it's time to start making the unicorns of Silicon Valley start cleaning up their own shit so that we can start worrying about our own. Because let's face it, we've all got plenty of our own shit to deal with, and we don't need to deal with Silicon Valley's as well. All right, I think that's it for the stream today. Do me a favor if you're watching this. Send anything via PayPal. Info@upforthechallenge.org. We're going to start making the world a very, very different place, and it's going to start being more fun for humans. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.